What's up, everybody? Welcome back to what they teach you in high school. Hey, today we are talking about the budget. We're going to start by talking about the evolution of the budget and who controls the budget. And then we're going to look at the ways that the government is funded and how the government spends the money. If you need to remember one thing about the budget, there really are only two certainties in this life: death and taxes. Welcome back to what they teach you in high school. So first things first, what even is a budget? Essentially, a budget is just the money that's coming in and the spending that's going out. But it's all about estimations. No one knows how much money is exactly going to come in until the money's come in. And no one knows exactly how much a project is going to cost until the money's been spent. But a budget attempts to give a really clear estimation and direction on how much money should go towards specific projects based on the revenue that's coming in. So with that being said, let's take a look at who really controls this budget. We're going to look back at our favorite, beloved, holy document, the Constitution. You can learn more about the Constitution in that video or that video or that video or any of these videos. They're not showing up, are they? Anyway, take a look at the Constitution videos, or if not, open up your pocket Constitution, which I don't have on me, don't tell anyone. You'll read in Article 1, Section 7, all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. So the House of Representatives, the body that has the most representation, has to start any bills that raise taxes. And that makes some sense. And therefore, it would also make sense that the Congress, and specifically the House of Representatives, would be responsible for crafting a budget. And also remember that at the founding of our country, we were really nervous about a really strong king or king-like person coming in and taking control. And so the president was less involved in the decision-making process, and the Congress crafted the budget, and really the president only signed or vetoed the budget, but the Congress managed the decision-making around it. And that makes sense. However, during World War I, the government ended up spending so much more money than they took in, and the decisions that needed to be made couldn't sit and be back and forth like they could be in Congress. And instead, the president took a very strong and influential role in determining how much money needed to be spent on an annual basis. The president became very involved in managing the budget and determining how much money would be needed in order to make all of the necessary payments, whether that be sending money to allies in the form of actual cash or weapons, but also as the United States got involved in the war themselves, they needed the resources to be able to supply their troops in order to win the war. In fact, Congress actually passed the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921. That office was actually set up under the executive branch. Therefore, the president oversaw that office. And the sole function of that office was to help establish a budget-making process. Today, we know that office as the Office of Management and Budget, which we mentioned in this video here. It's still not there, is it? Dang it! Essentially, how the budget process changed then was the president was responsible for creating a first draft of a budget. Now, I know that most of you high schoolers understand what a first draft is, but typically your first draft ultimately just becomes your last draft because you don't actually make the changes necessary to your paper, and so your first draft is your last draft, but that's not so with the United States government. In fact, the president sends their first draft to the Congress, and they edit that puppy like they are an English teacher with a vendetta. That's a big word, you can look that one up. One president in particular, President Nixon, kind of got a little too big for his britches, and that's saying something about that guy.
To offset the loss of revenue from these tax cuts, which directly stimulate new jobs, I have ordered today a $4 7/10 billion cut in federal spending.
He utilized the power of impoundment in order to cancel items that the Congress put into the budget that he didn't like so much. Essentially, he was not spending massive amounts of the money that the Congress had allocated for specific projects. It's kind of a cheeky move. That led in 1974 to Congress passing the Budget and Impoundment Act of 1974, essentially saying that, hey, if Congress decides that they think this project is worth spending money on, the president must act to spend the money that Congress has allocated. Today, we notice that the president still drafts their initial budget, but the Congress has massive amounts of say in how the budget actually gets enacted. And now let's take a look at the 4 steps in the budget making process to understand how this chicken gets cooked. So essentially, step 1 or phase 1 of the budget process we've covered quite extensively already. The president drafts their initial budget request and sends it to the United States Congress. Phase 2, Congress crafts a budget resolution. When do you need a resolution? Only when you got a problem. Regardless of who's in power, a Republican or a Democrat, and who manages the Congress, Republicans or Democrats, they're never going to see eye to eye on everything. And therefore, when the president sends the budget to the Congress, you know Congress is going to have some problems. With the budget, of course. And problems, probably personal problems, maybe marital problems. I mean, it's a lot of people in there, so you never know what problems you might encounter in the Congress. Here's where we need to kind of disassociate from reality, because the Congress is supposed to pass 12 different appropriations bills in order to fund the 12 different major departments of the government. However, they haven't exactly done that in I don't know, since any of you guys have been born, and they do it a different way, but we're jumping ahead to phase 4. So let me just make sure you know that phase 3 is the Congress passes each of the individual appropriations bills that then make up the total budget. Phase 4, either the president signs those appropriations bills, or what we've experienced pretty much for your entire high school, middle school, and elementary school lives, is the Congress passes an omnibus bill or a continuing resolution. An omnibus is when all those different bills, those 12 individual appropriations bills, get lumped together into one massive spending bill. Instead of being able to debate each of those 12 different departments and how they should be funded, essentially you can either pass the one omnibus bill and fund the government, or not pass the omnibus bill and the government shuts down. You're going to want to watch this video here if you want to learn just exactly what happens and how the government can be shut down. Still not there, really, wow. So more than likely, the Congress is going to pass what's called a continuing resolution. And a continuing resolution, or CR, essentially funds the government for some certain amount of time, maybe a week or a month or 2 months. And oftentimes they connect that funding level with the same levels of funding that happened in the year past or the months past. What it says is we need a little bit more time. But when you've been operating on continuing resolutions for the past 6 years, maybe time's not the problem with some of these people. Next, I want to quickly talk about some of the major revenue sources for the federal government, as well as some of the major expenditures that the government spends those tax dollars on. So essentially, there are 3 major forms of taxation the federal government utilizes in order to fund the government. The first is individual taxes. And that makes up over half of the total revenue that the government takes in. The other half of the government is split between corporate taxes and payroll taxes, which companies pay on behalf of their employees. In 2022, $4.9 trillion was taken in by the government. That's trillion with a T. Of that 4.9 trillion, 2.6 trillion was individual income taxes. Next, I want to quickly talk about some of the major expenses that the government spends their money on. Now, there's 2 major categories: discretionary spending and mandatory spending. Mandatory spending is spending that the government has promised to people that they're going to do, and it takes a law of Congress to change whether or not they can spend more or less money on those items. The 2 major expenses are major healthcare expenses and Social Security expenses. In fact, both of those expenses make up for roughly 33% each of mandatory spending. In 2022, Social Security spent $1.23 trillion. That's like a third of the total budget. Meanwhile, there's also what we call discretionary spending. We have discretion on how much we spend on a yearly basis, and we don't need to pass a new law in order to change how much we spend. And of discretionary spending, half of the money is spent on military. And the military spent in 2022 between $560 billion and $780 billion. And so folks, there you have it. There's your quick and dirty summary of the budget, the revenues that we take in, as well as some of the major expenditures that the government spends money on, both in discretionary spending and in mandatory spending. Hey, as always, thanks so much for watching What They Teach You in High School. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, and hit that little bell button so you know I'm coming next time. As always, make sure you're sharing these with your friends, with your family, and most importantly, with your high school social studies teacher. Thanks as always for watching What They Teach You in High School. We'll see you guys next time, and have a great start to the week. Peace.